the U.S. has substantially increased its military presence in the Caribbean. Warships, stealth fighters, naval destroyers, cruisers, subs. The chances of targeted military strikes or operations are rising. The buildup appears aimed as much at coercion and pressure, regime behavior change, as it is at counter-narcotics, but that pressure could spill over into military conflict, especially if provoked.
Well, that's a very important question right now because we seem to have a military buildup of some kind off the coast of Venezuela. And President Trump has implied that he has every intention of intervening in Venezuela. You know, this is this is something else that we haven't discussed, and that the president has let everybody down in this regard. You know, FDR had these things he called fireside chats, as you well know. And these fireside chats were very few. I think there were only 6 or 7. But they were very effective because the president would speak on the radio to the American people from his office, but in a very casual but straightforward way, and explain this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And many people who were opposed to whatever he was doing at the time, Lend-Lease is a good example, they listened to him. And after they listened to his rationale, they said, all right, we'll support you. I haven't heard that from this president, and I think this country really needs that right now. He needs to explain himself. He needs to explain, this is why I want to go into Venezuela. Now, you can disagree with him, but he ought to say that. He ought to tell us what's the objective. What are we trying to achieve down there? You know, I keep telling people, and I've got friends on active duty that are well aware of this. I said, you've got 1,700 miles of coastline on the Caribbean, on the Venezuelan coast. That's almost the same distance as the American-Mexican border on land. Then you have 1,379-mile border with Colombia, another 1,380-mile border with Brazil. This is an enormous place. This is practically France and Germany together. And you want to intervene in this place? What are you going to use? And now if somebody says, well, we want to replace the regime, fine. What if it doesn't work? What do you do then? Do you double down on failure, which is what we did in Vietnam, right? And send in more troops to do what? And in the meantime, this could turn into a Latin American crusade aimed at America, at the United States, because we've been to Latin America before. We don't have the best of reputations down there, whether that's fully deserved or not. It doesn't matter. It's the truth. Why are we doing this?
Under the Constitution, Congress should debate, question, and formally authorize significant military actions. In practice, political realities and decades of precedent have tilted power toward the president. Many analysts and lawmakers think reasserting congressional authority through stronger war powers legislation, mandatory votes on authorizations, or stricter funding limits is essential if the U.S. wants to avoid forever wars without clear democratic consent.
The Congress of the United States has let the American people down. The Senate and the House, the members aren't doing their duty. They have an obligation to raise all these questions, to demand explanations. The president has been, at least for the last 50 years in my lifetime, effectively free to do pretty much whatever he wanted. And if he thinks he needs support, Congress rolls over and gives him some sort of resolution that allows him to commit an act of war without a declaration of war. We went through that with the Gulf of Tonkin, as you know. Right. So what are we doing? What is this all about? See, and the other part is that Congress will say, well, my constituents don't ask questions. And that may be true. So maybe part of the fault lies with us. We haven't asked any of these questions.
Meanwhile, additional Israeli strikes against Iran, supported by the United States, remain likely, with Washington providing significant assistance and maintaining a strong force posture in the region. However, a full-scale coordinated invasion or all-out war still appears unlikely in the near term. Should Israel pursue such an escalation, the consequences could be devastating.
Well, I think we know that whatever happens is not going to be discussed in advance. And we've already seen the surprise attack that the Israelis launched against the Iranians during what people thought was a legitimate negotiation. So I fully expect that there will be no warning per se to the American people or to anybody about what ensues. But we do see a decided buildup of aircraft and munitions and missiles being reallocated, vessels at sea, as well as refueling assets are moving into the region. Something could happen at almost any time at this point. I would say certainly within the next few weeks at the outside, because the other problem is you can't keep armed forces, air, land, sea, in hyper readiness for long periods of time. So there's a point at which you've got to either pull the trigger or get out. Again, no one is being asked in the United States. And the other problem, as we discussed, is that it looks like Prime Minister Netanyahu has more control over these matters than the president or Congress.
While Israel publicly claims its strikes on Iran aim to prevent nuclear weapons, a closer analysis suggests the real goal is regime change and control. Every action, from targeted assassinations of Iranian scientists to cyber attacks and repeated airstrikes on Iranian military and proxy sites, appears designed to weaken the Iranian government and destabilize its power structures rather than merely slow a nuclear program. By keeping Iran under constant military, economic, and political pressure, Israel, with U.S. backing, seeks to limit Tehran's influence in the region and assert control over the Middle East balance of power.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, and I think the goal is still the same. I mean, what Israel isn't interested and absolutely could not overtake and govern Iran. But the Israeli position is very clear. The more balkanized the region, the more dissension and division in the region, the safer Israel is. That's their theory. So again, I suspect they will do everything in their power to achieve a decapitation. This is the problem. I don't think that's going to work. And the Iranians have made it pretty clear that they have real depth now, that more than they've ever had before. They've distributed critical weapon systems all over the country in various provinces. They're ready for the kind of attack that I think the Israelis want to launch. So the Israelis know that there is no chance for them to succeed on their own. And once again, that means they need us. The question is, how are we going to perform? What are we going to do this time around? And I'm a little concerned about that, because I think the air defense capability in Iran is much better than it was before. It's not 100%, but it's certainly 60 to 70% of everything that they would want. And I'm concerned that we will take casualties this time. There will be no restraint exercised by Iran. Iran will regard this as an existential fight to the finish, and they will use everything at their disposal.
The U.S. frequently portrays Iran as a major threat to its national security, citing its nuclear program and regional influence. Yet in reality, much of the perceived threat comes from rhetoric, proxy conflicts in the Middle East, and U.S. strategic interests, rather than any actual capacity to harm American citizens or territory. The narrative of an existential threat has often been used to justify sanctions, military buildups, and interventions in the region. Given these facts, let's ask Colonel Douglas McGregor. Does Iran really represent any threat to the United States?
No, it never has. By the way, I don't see any evidence that Venezuela poses any threat to the United States. I mean, if you want to attack places that present a real threat, those two aren't on the list. But it doesn't matter. Again, Congress isn't raising that question. Congress isn't debating this, and the president can act as he wishes. And right now, he's going to do whatever the Israeli government and Mr. Netanyahu tell him to do.
Colonel, you and I will be together with friends and colleagues on Saturday in Dallas.
Yes, we are. It should be interesting, and I'm sure some of it will be tense. But the good news is that it's sold out, and we're very pleased by that. And I think the audience that's going to be there is going to come armed and ready with good questions, because the real point of all of this is we've got to find a way forward other than the one we're on. And as we've discussed so many times, the Democrats and the Republicans, what's the profound difference? Where is it? I mean, we just don't see it. Right now, we have this argument over the shutdown. The Democrats come out with a $3 trillion deficit, on their budget. The Republicans come out with a $2 trillion deficit. They don't get it. Neither of them get it. And none of them are talking about the issues that we're raising that are going to have a profound impact on us economically. Because if you go back to war this time with Iran, I would rather suspect you'll see the Straits of Hormuz shut down, because now most of the oil and gas coming out of Iran can be shipped by rail all the way to China. And you have new pipelines from Russia into China. So I don't think the Chinese are going to be hurt as badly as they would have been otherwise. But what happens to the rest of the world? What happens then when the price of oil goes through the roof? Nobody seems to bring these things up. If anybody had any idea the damage to us and our economy, I think they'd throw everybody in Washington out of office.
Colonel, before I let you go, this may please you or aggravate you. I'm not sure which. But here's Colonel Milley.
Oh, Milley.
Right before
General
General
Milley.
Milley, former chair, at the time chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, right before he retired.
You see, we in uniform are unique. We are unique among the world's armies. We are unique among the world's militaries. We don't take an oath to a country. We don't take an oath to a tribe. We don't take an oath to a religion. We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. And we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator. We don't take an oath to an individual. We take an oath to the Constitution, and we take an oath to the idea that is America, and we're willing to die to protect it. Every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, Guardian, and Coast Guardsman, each of us commits our very life to protect and defend that document, regardless of personal price. And we are not easily intimidated.
Any problems with that?
Yes, the words in the oath are not what he said they are. When you take the oath, and I've taken it many times ever since I was commissioned at West Point, you say, I swear to uphold and defend the United States Constitution and to obey the orders of the president and the officers appointed over me. That's key. If you are a professional soldier and you get an order from the president or the officers appointed over you, who are also appointed by the president, and you do not think that this order is legitimate, if it's immoral, or you think it violates the Constitution, then you have an obligation to resign. That's very important. Now, if you don't think it violates the Constitution, or you're not sure, or you don't think it's immoral, then you are expected to obey. Now, Milley was the senior advisor to the president, senior military advisor to the president of the United States. He commands or commanded nothing. He has no authority. Milley, as the senior military advisor to the president, took many actions while he was in that office that really upset people, not the least of which, independently, without consulting the president, or as far as we know, anyone in the national security arena, to call his opposite number in China and reassure the defense minister of China that whatever was happening was no threat to him. Now, I'm not bothered by the fact that he made the comment that there was no threat to China, because there wasn't. But on the other hand, he acted without authority. He did something that he was not authorized to do, and he pretended that he had a degree of authority in the chain of command that he didn't have. That's the tip of the iceberg. So this issue of, I swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, number one, and number two, as part of that, and I obey the orders of the president and the officers appointed over me. There's tension there, Judge.
Right.
That has always been there. That was something that MacArthur complained about. If you go back,
Wow, we know how that ended up with MacArthur. It's funny that the oath that judges take is nearly identical to the one the president takes: preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. Nothing in there about people telling us what to do or having to comply with orders.
but that's a big difference, Judge.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a profound.
We are not, we in uniform are not free agents. If you're in the regular army of the United States, you're not a free agent. You don't pick and choose where to fight, when to fight, how to fight, all this sort of business. But if you feel strongly about something, then resign. And one of the biggest complaints I've had throughout my lifetime, I've listened to all of these general officers that retired, and they would say, well, I was present for that meeting and I knew that was wrong. Well, if you thought it was wrong, General, why didn't you say anything? And we went through this in Vietnam. I've heard this over and over and over again. So, General Milley, don't posture as some heroic figure that stood up to a president that you didn't like, who pursued policies you didn't privately support, and tell us that you did all that you could. He didn't.
Is President Trump a free agent, or is he subject to a foreign power?
Well, right now, I think it's pretty obvious that this president is clearly not a free agent when it comes to matters pertaining to the Israeli state. I don't think anybody questions that. But I'm just very frustrated with senior military leaders who retire and say one thing while they were on active duty. They said and did something else. So either shut up and obey and get on with it, or put your views online. Say, look, I don't agree with this, and I cannot, with a clear conscience, execute these orders. You know, Harold K. Johnson, as Chief of Staff of the Army, was on his way over in 1968 to see the president, to go to the White House, and he had his letter of resignation, and he had a change of heart. And he came back and he justified his change of heart about Vietnam by saying, well, I thought I could do more good on active duty than I could by leaving. That was wrong. If he, as the Chief of Staff of the Army, had resigned, turned in his letter, don't you think that would have had an electrifying impact on the American?
Absolutely.
So this kind of thing, I'm sick of people like Milley who stand up there and say these things because they don't like the president. How many times have I served under a president I didn't vote for when I was on active duty? Several. And how many times did I wish that something was different? Many times. But those policies came from the top, and we had an obligation to obey. And we did.
You are imbued with intellectual honesty, Colonel, and I deeply appreciate our professional collaboration and our friendship, and I look forward to being with you in Dallas on Saturday.
We'll tear the place up.
Hopefully. You say the audience will come well armed, and they will. We're going to be in Texas.
Right. That's right. Well, some of these people are flying in from outside the state, so
all right.
Interesting collection, but you're right.
Right.
You're right. And that's one of the things I like about Texas.